Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 308 for the 14th of September 2014. Richard Saunders here with you from South Australia, the wonderful state of South Australia, and I'm at Malala Motorsport Park. You can probably hear some of the cars zooming around the track in the background. I'm here today, as I've been for the last few days, to do some work, in-car video type work, which I do from time to time, and that's a lot of fun. I've snuck away, found a moment to snack away to record the introduction for the Skeptic Zone. Well, what's coming up this week? We're going to kick off with an interesting report written by Mick Vagg, which appeared on theconversation.com, possibly inspired by the latest issue of the Skeptic magazine, the journal from Australian Skeptics. And in the latest issue, there's an item about pharmacies. Pharmacies and their unfortunate habit, in this country at least, of selling what we consider to be quackery. Homeopathy, iridology, ear candles, and that sort of thing. A very interesting piece by Mick Vagg coming up at the top of the show, followed by something I think may have appeared on the Skeptic Zone before over the years. I'll have to check into that. This is an open letter to the Pharmacies of Australia that I wrote some years ago on behalf of Australian skeptics, basically appealing to them to stop selling ear candles, especially, and other quackery, but especially ear candles. Good old ear candles. I think the very first Dr. Raichi reports on the Skeptic Zone 6 years ago was about ear candles. Of all the bizarre quackery I've seen over the years, folks, sticking a candle in your ear and lighting the other end. Hello, there's a fly. I think if you Google Malala, you'll discover it's a very interesting location near Adelaide in South Australia, but I've been told the flies here can get pretty bad. Pretty bad. Anyway, back to the show. After that, it's Evidence, Please, with Jo Alabaster. And Jo is going to be looking into vitamin K and why some people don't take advantage of vitamin K. I don't know very much about vitamin K myself, so I'll be very interested to hear Jo Alabaster's Evidence, Please this week. After that, it's A Week in Science from our friends at the Royal Institution of Australia. That's only about an hour away from where I am right now, at Malala, and I haven't got time to visit. Oh well. Go away, fly. Out, damn fly. There we go. And I'm using a car as a recording booth today. And then to round off the show, it's Maynard's Spooky Action. More Maynard from Skeptics in the Pub the other week here in Sydney. Maynard catches up with our dear friend Joanne Benhamu. Joanne Benhamu, who did some reports on the Skeptic Zone a little while ago. Joanne's off to live in Melbourne. We wish her every luck, every success, of course. But he'll be chatting to Jo about her opinions on Chinese medicine and other things. And then a chat with an old friend of mine, Gary Dalrymple, who runs a Freecon, a free sort of science fiction fantasy convention for writers and authors in Sydney, and more information about that. So a little bit of an abbreviated show this week because I'm on the road. I'm pretty busy making sure all the racing cars have cameras whirring away inside, getting some work done. So while I have a look around me now, maybe grab a nice cool drink of water because it's a hot day, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. As published on theconversation.com on the 12th of September 2014 by Mick Vagg. Are pharmacists as trustworthy as they'd like us to believe? Pharmacists are continuously held up as among the most respected and trusted of professionals. They fulfill an important role within the health professions of being the gatekeepers of medication dispensing and the link between the community and their medication use. For more than 100 years, there has been a very clear and ethical distinction between doctors, who prescribe medications, and pharmacists, who sell them. That way, the argument goes, doctors have no direct financial interest in the drugs they prescribe, and pharmacists have no direct financial interest in recommending any of the drugs on their shelves directly to patients. So far, so good. There has been a bit of a role creep over the years, with calls from some doctors to be allowed to sell their own concoctions directly to their patients, as well as a much more concerted push by pharmacists to play a bigger role in healthcare, including providing immunisations and health checks direct to consumers. Naturally, this is of concern to GPs, as such proposals have the potential to fragment primary healthcare even further, not to mention taking the critical role of diagnosis, putting it into the hands of those who are underqualified, underinsured, and under-supported to handle it. What concerns me particularly is not so much that these health checks will take away work from GPs. If anything, I suspect they will increase GPs' workloads, sorting out the advice already given to patients by wannabe GP enthusiasts, like pharmacists and their associated naturopaths. This month's Skeptic magazine, from Australian Skeptics, highlights the problems quite well. I think it's time for pharmacists to decide if they want to keep the trust placed in them by the community to give sound advice. If they want to remain a trusted source of advice, they need to lift their game and get all the ear candles, homeopathy, magnets, herbs and supplements out of their shops, along with the iridologists and their other fairground, quote, health professionals, end quote. In short, they need to start acting like they deserve the trust and respect that is accorded them. We have heard nothing from the training and CPD requirements for pharmacists who want to diagnose and treat patients, let alone how they will be insured. I would want to see all this detail before I let my croupy baby or breathless grandmother within a bull's roar of a pharmacist's diagnosis skills. The protectionism involved in the business of running pharmacies is breathtaking. Like dentists, only pharmacists are legally allowed to profit from running pharmacies, and they have defended this with all the bitterness and vitriol you might expect from a group who know they are onto a good thing. Health Minister Peter Dutton seems all for the pharmacists' ambitions and has been on the medical trail vowing not to wind back their protected status. So it seems the pharmacists will have all they want. I wonder if they deserve it. I hope they take the opportunity to lift their game as a profession and use their protected status to raise standards, not profits. A good place to start would be to stop advertising and selling shonky devices and products that would be considered fraudulent in any other context. Too hard? Then get out of the expanded responsibility game for good. From Australian Skeptics, an open letter to the pharmacists of Australia. Australians trust pharmacies and chemist shops. As pharmacists, you play an important role in the health of the Australian public by functioning as a conduit between doctors and prescription or pharmaceutical drugs. You also have a respected role as a first resource for medical advice for many people in our community. We are all familiar with the slogan, "Ask your pharmacist." When we ask our pharmacist, what kind of answers do we want? Not quack products like ear candles that do nothing except pose a health hazard. We now ask our Australian pharmacist, what standards should you set for yourselves? You sell a growing number of products for which there is very little or no scientific evidence of efficacy. Calling them, quote, alternative, end quote, does not make them work. Examples include homeopathic preparations, magnetic pain relief devices, detox programs, dodgy weight loss products, and ear candles. Such products commonly appear in the, quote, natural medicine, end quote, section of pharmacies, but are sometimes displayed alongside real medicines whose benefits are scientifically proven. Ear candles are of particular concern. There are reports of serious injuries from them, including temporary hearing loss, burns, ear canals blocked by dripping wax, and punctured eardrums. Health Canada has banned them in Canada. Even the first professor of alternative and complementary medicine at Exeter University, Edzard Ernst, calls for them to be banned. Despite this, many Australian pharmacies are selling them. What next? Will you start selling cigarettes like supermarkets who you do not want to be allowed to sell pharmaceuticals because they do not have qualified staff? What standards do you set for yourself and your staff? We see a growing trend of so-called, quote, practitioners, end quote, with little or no scientific training being brought in as, quote, consultants, end quote, including iridologists, homeopaths and naturopaths. Iridology is a discredited way of diagnosing the dysfunction of internal organs via markings on the iris. There is no evidence that it works, but some pharmacies promote the fact that customers can get, quote, readings, end quote, in their stores. Your customers rely on you and anyone in a professional capacity within your store to provide sound medical advice and products. We fear in some cases they are receiving what amounts to little more than magical sugar pills and bad health advice. Pharmacies need to make a profit, but this should not be done through quack products and bad advice. To regain the status a pharmacy should have, a place to get good sound advice and effective medicine supported by science and clinical evidence, we implore our pharmacies to stick to worthy products sold by knowledgeable staff. Australian Skeptics Inc.
Did you see that UFO sighting that made the news? What did that latest study about alternative treatments really say? Is this photo making the rounds real or a hoax? Doubtful News is a unique website featuring news about pseudoscience, the paranormal, anomalies, and questionable claims framed with a skeptical view. Come visit doubtfulnews.com every day for news about cryptozoology, conspiracies, shams, scams, and more. Follow us on Twitter at Doubtful News. Critical thinking is essential in assessing today's news. Doubtful News helps you decide, can you really believe this stuff?
What we want is some more evidence, please. Here's Jo Alabaster.
Hello, this is Jo Alabaster. Preliminary research presented at this year's Council of State and Territorial Epidemiologists Conference in the US, which looked at the rising issue of parents refusing vitamin K shots for their newborns, has shown a correlation between vitamin K refusal and vaccine refusal. Vitamin K is needed by humans to allow complete synthesis of proteins that we use for blood coagulation. Without it, we're at risk of blood clotting issues, ranging from bruising to severe bleeding and hemorrhagic disease. Healthy adults and older children are able to maintain adequate vitamin K levels, in part via their diet, but predominantly because vitamin K is produced by bacteria in the gut. Newborn babies, however, are born with a sterile gut. The gut biome is not yet in place to assist in maintaining vitamin K levels. Vitamin K is not sufficiently present in the baby's system, as it has trouble passing through the placenta in utero. As such, babies have very little vitamin K in their bodies at birth. There is very little vitamin K in breast milk, and it can take breastfed babies several weeks to establish and maintain a gut biome which produces sufficient vitamin K. Modern baby formulas are fortified with vitamin K, so formula-fed babies can be quicker to establish their vitamin K levels. All babies, however, can have the absorption of vitamin K and the development of a balanced gut biome interrupted if they experience digestive disturbances such as vomiting or diarrhea, if they require antibiotics, or if they are affected by liver disease. 0.25 to 1.7% of babies who do not receive a vitamin K shot at birth develop classic vitamin K deficiency bleeding, which is fortunately rarely fatal. Late vitamin K deficiency bleeding is rarer, affecting 4 to 7 of every 100,000 infants who haven't had the shot, but much more dangerous. hemorrhaging nearly always occurs in babies' brains, around 20% of affected babies die, and 50% sustain long-term brain damage. As such, all newborn babies in Australia are offered a vitamin K shot at birth as a prophylactic measure. An alternative to injection is available, oral vitamin K drops administered 3 times, once at birth, once at 3 to 5 days of age, and once again at 4 weeks of age. Due to the sometimes fluctuating efficacy of babies' digestive systems, the potential for missed doses, and the longer time it takes for all doses to be complete, the oral administration of vitamin K is less reliable than injection and is not recommended for babies who have digestive issues, are premature, or are unwell. There are no documented adverse effects resulting from vitamin K shots. However, in the early 1990s, 2 studies suggested a causal link between vitamin K shots and childhood cancers. These studies were discredited due to poor methods and small sample sizes, and subsequent reviews have found no similar links. Unfortunately, the discredited studies have hung around, gaining credence in certain circles, much like Wakefield's discredited paper linking autism to the MMR vaccine. On to the news. Rates of vitamin K shot refusal have been rising in the US. According to a report in the journal Pediatrics, the rate of refusal has almost doubled in Alberta from 0.21% in 2006 to 0.39% in 2012. Prompted by the death of 4 babies in Nashville who developed late vitamin K deficiency bleeding after their parents declined the shot, a team of researchers looked into vitamin K refusal rates and parental attitudes, presenting their preliminary findings at the Council of State and Territorial Epidemiologists Conference in Nashville, Tennessee last June. Of babies born in 2013 at a Nashville Children's Hospital, the rate of shot refusal was 2.7%. The team also looked at the rate of refusal across 5 freestanding birthing centres, which was substantially higher at 28%. Parents who refused the vitamin K shot for their newborns were invited to participate in a survey on their attitudes towards the vitamin K shot. 47% of these parents responded. The leading reasons given for refusal were a desire for a natural birthing process and believing prophylaxis was unnecessary. Of the survey respondents, 65% also refused the hepatitis B vaccine and erythromycin eye ointment, which is routinely given to newborns in the US as a preventative measure against eye infections. Mothers who refused the shot were more likely to have epidural-free vaginal deliveries, and babies delivered by midwives were 8 times less likely to receive vitamin K than babies delivered by doctors. Now, here's an interesting statistic. The children of parents who declined the vitamin K shot are 15 times more likely than other children to have received no vaccines by the time they're 15 months old. This is the first time that a link has been demonstrated between vaccine refusal and vitamin K refusal. From the preliminary findings, quote, "This group of parents often shares a particular worldview of health that includes a preference for natural health remedies and questions the standard recommended practices of established medical authorities." End quote. There is a crucial difference between vaccine refusal and vitamin K refusal, however. A parent who initially refuses vaccines, then has a change of mind, is able to put their child on a catch-up schedule, providing them with protection for the future. Unfortunately, though, there is no catch-up schedule for vitamin K shots. Given the small window of time for bleeding risk, vitamin K refusal presents a very immediate danger to babies whose parents decline the shot.
Hey, this is Jay Novella from the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe podcast. Did you know that there are thousands of skeptical reports, interviews, and investigations going back to 1981, free to download? Just visit www.skeptics.com.au. Click the publications link and enjoy almost every back issue of The Skeptic, the journal from Australian skeptics. You can also subscribe online and get the latest digital or hard copy of this, the world's second oldest skeptical magazine. That's www.skeptics.com.au or just Google Australian Skeptics.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus, bringing you the science you need to know. The Ebola outbreaks you've seen in the movies might scare the daylights out of you, but how realistic are they? What is Ebola, and do you need to worry? The proper name for the disease is Ebola hemorrhagic fever. There are 5 strains of the disease. The 2014 outbreak in West Africa is the Zaire strain, which is the most virulent form and comes from bats. It is transmitted by direct contact with infected bodily fluids, such as blood, sweat, tears, saliva, or vomit. It can even be carried in semen up to 7 weeks after the infection has cleared. Fatality rates of Ebola in humans can be as high as 90%. It normally causes death by lowering blood pressure, causing organs to fail, and weakening the immune system. So while there is currently no proven vaccine or cure, death rates can be reduced by treating the dehydration and using antibiotics to treat secondary infections. Symptoms generally appear around 8 to 10 days after infection, but in some cases can take up to 3 weeks to appear, meaning someone could have infected lots of people before they even know they have Ebola. Even then, the early symptoms can seem innocuous, such as red eyes or a rash. Symptoms develop to include a high fever, severe headache, muscle pain, vomiting, diarrhoea, and unexplained bleeding or bruising. Outbreaks often occur in warm areas like West Africa. This heat can affect health workers' focus, increasing the chance of accidental infection. To combat this, they generally work in pairs and for no more than 40 minutes at a time in the biosafety equipment. And now, 4 fast facts about Ebola. Ebola was first identified in 1976, and it's named after the Ebola River, where one of the first outbreaks was recorded. You know, in movies where patients spew blood and bleed to death? That's a bit of a myth. Ebola isn't as dramatic as that, and patients mainly just look sick or weak. The Ebola virus is transmitted to humans from wild animals, particularly fruit bats, which are a popular bushmeat. And there may be hope for a vaccine, with human trials underway in America. That's it for This Week in Science. For more information on Ebola, go to the RiAus website, riaus.org.au. Follow us on Twitter at RiAus and like us on Facebook. I'm Alison Kershaw, and we'll catch you next week.
Раз, два, три, четыре.
Друзья, меня зовут Кирилл Алферов, и я основатель общества скептиков. Мы зовем вас на наши встречи, которые проходят каждые 2 недели в Москве, и также приглашаем послушать наш подкаст, который выходит каждую неделю. Подкаст называется «Скептик», а сайт, на котором вы можете узнать о нашей деятельности, это www.skepticsociety.ru. Hey everybody, my name is Kirill, and I'm the founder of Skeptic Society Russia. Come visit us in Moscow in our bi-weekly meetings, and also listen to our weekly podcast, which is called Skeptic. And the site where you can find all of that is skepticsociety.ru.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Well, I'm here with Jo Benhamu. How are you today?
I'm very well, Maynard.
And look, why do you think we should still be a skeptic in 2014? Why should we still be one? What is still to be done?
Well, there's plenty still to be done. In fact, there's probably more reason now for us to be sceptical than ever before because, we've gone through this period where we've got access to so much information than we ever have before. Most of it is completely unfiltered and unchecked, and humans have not changed very much. We're still just as flawed, silly, and gullible as we ever were.
And what woo has got your goat recently?
Oh,
I know it's usually pretty. It's a very large Venn diagram, a couple of them to choose from.
Look, I never stray far away from the alternative medicines, but these days I'm quite interested in traditional Chinese medicine because I think there's quite a lot of risk of harm there when it's not sort of well controlled, and I think also because out of all the alternative medicines, it's the one that has the greatest risk of harm, not just to humans, but also to all the endangered species.
So can I go down to Chinatown here and get myself a bit of a ephedra or not?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because I know they banned it in the US.
I reckon these days you could probably go down to Chinatown and get just about anything you want.
Now, of course, there is a strong political lobby with the Chinese medicine that goes along with that. And does that make it a bit more difficult to put a bit of weight behind?
It does very much so, because you can be seen sometimes if you're criticising Chinese medicine, or traditional Chinese medicine, I should say, you could be seen as being culturally insensitive. But ultimately, if you go to China and if you know the history of traditional Chinese medicine, you'll know that in fact, while people claim that it's got this history that goes back thousands and thousands of years, in fact, it was brought back by Mao Zedong when he was around as a way to provide medical care for the masses when they couldn't really afford to provide the good quality evidence-based medicine that we know. So it's the whole argument from antiquity. It's been around forever, so it must be good. But so many of the Chinese medicines that you can buy are adulterated with heavy metals. As I said before, there's a huge risk to endangered species from things.
Because there's no quality control with it, you don't even know how much of the active ingredient is in it, if any.
Exactly, and in fact, just last week, a report came out in the news about a woman down in Melbourne who ended up severely ill after she was prescribed some kind of traditional Chinese herbal remedy, and she was given instructions on how to use it. It boiled these herbs in her kitchen, drank whatever sort of tea or concoction came out of it, and she ended up severely ill in intensive care, I think it was, as a result of this.
Wow.
And
Look, let's just have a bit of a shout out right now to all the nurses out there listening that are doing the good job in the hospitals, in the care places every day. Because I'd like to give them a bit of a shout out. Good on you.
I think we should. Yeah, shout out to all the wonderful nurses out there doing an amazing job looking after patients. And really,
what did you find the most difficult thing about looking after patients in a hospital situation? Is it that they're cranky, there's a psychological aspect to it, or is it the physical aspect with the lifting of them, or the irky aspect because of the things you have to do? What's the most difficult part of the job for you?
Well, look, I haven't been on the wards for a long time. These days I've got more of
You're in your ivory tower? I'm
in my ivory tower, yes. So I work in clinical trials these days, so I'm behind a desk a lot of the time. But ultimately, I've always loved the privilege I have of being able to look after patients or look after people at a time when they're at the most vulnerable. And, something I've always said is that, for example, being diagnosed with cancer doesn't suddenly make you a nice person. So there are times when you could be looking after someone who has quite a challenging personality and maybe they're not being particularly nice to you. And I think that one of the hardest things is, when you've got a patient who maybe is being quite unpleasant, is finding the way to kind of traverse the boundaries between recognising that they are vulnerable and that you have a duty of care to them, but at the same time making it clear that it's not acceptable to treat any professional who's looking after you in a disrespectful way. So
that would become in handy in debates and during dating as well.
Yes, it's quite a handy skill to have. That's true.
Well, look, enjoy your trip down to... When do you move? When do we lose you to the south, to the southerners?
A couple of weeks left. Still, wrapping things up in Sydney. Got a lot of things to do and people to say goodbye to. But
because you're evidence-based, Jo, and everyone who knows you should get a chance to at least have a drink with you before you go, which means you'll spend the entire time drunk before you leave, which is probably... look, tell us, what's the most exciting development in actual medicine that's on the horizon that you've seen? Gee, that looks pretty good. Because you read all the books, you know all the big words, you can actually navigate PubMed, unlike myself, because I don't know efficacy even has me tricked. So what do you think is really big?
I think that genetics and personalised medicine is one of the most exciting things that we have to look forward to.
So you want to live in the world like Gattaca, do you? You want Gattaca? The valids and the invalids. That's what you're talking, are you?
Well, I love that movie, but no.
Good.
No, I think the most exciting thing is just the fact that treatments these days are becoming more and more and more targeted to the individual. So as we're getting a better understanding of the human genome and of how different treatments can be tailored towards an individual's genetic makeup, we're able to find incredible ways to treat diseases that we never would have thought possible. And we've got a long way to go, and the ethics around it are still, in terms of anything to do with genetics and genetic testing and so on, the huge ethical issues to debate and for society to consider. But in terms of what we've got to look forward to, I think the future looks very bright.
Are you sure we won't just gravitate towards regrowing hair and making penises larger?
I suspect that will definitely happen. In fact, I'll be checking my spam inbox when I get home, and I'm sure I'll find a few things in there.
Well, enjoy your trip down, and please don't go over to the dark side of sport. We mustn't lose you to sport.
No, it'll never happen. Never. I tried. I can't do it.
Well, I'm here with a real troublemaker, a guy who you tour the world causing trouble. Who have we got, sir?
I'm Gary, and I'm here, I guess, to try and tell people about a free science fiction convention which is taking place over the weekend of December 5, 6 and 7 at a place called Clempton Park.
But why a science fiction festival at this place? And what are you going to do? Is it going to be a bunch of book... Will Shatner be there?
He's not actually answering my emails at the moment.
Oh, the bastard.
But he's possibly on an away mission somewhere doing something unbelievable if you catch his program on SBS at 1:30 in the morning. But why don't we get back to the Freecon? Because
let's get back to this sort of science fiction here.
Yes, this sort of science fiction. This is real science fiction. Now, what we're going to be doing is, in previous years, I've run Freecons at Bankstown, North Sydney, the Australian Museum, the New South Wales Institute of Technology. But what we're likely to have is about a dozen science fiction and fantasy writers who will be on panels. They'll be discussing their work and the progress of science fiction and fantasy publishing generally. There'll be a number of audience interest events which I call whiteboard democracy, where we'll have a whiteboard and you can write up a topic, and depending on how many people sort of tick it, circle it or whatever, there's a possibility that will be one of the afternoon topics on the Saturday or the Sunday.
This will not be a magnet for loonies, will it?
Well, we don't get loonies at Clempton Park. They generally sort of get...
They stop at Bexley North. See, this strikes me as something that would be good, as your other ones have been, for an up-and-coming author or someone who's maybe experiencing even a bit of writer's block at the time being.
Particularly because one of the features of this event will be a short story writing competition that will not only be judged by whoever attends the Freecon, it will also provide anyone who cares to enter it with an opportunity for a bit of direct feedback, in that they can see what all the other stories are like. They can possibly stand next to their story and sort of make veiled hints as to why this one is terrific, and possibly be told by actual readers that no, it's not that good because it doesn't make sense there and all that sort of stuff.
So how would people find out about this online? You've got a website? Is there a place we can all go and have a bit of a look at this?
Surprisingly, we do have a website. It's in being created at the moment. But you can write to me, that old-fashioned sort of version of picking up a quill pen, sharpening it, dipping it in ink.
And let's face it, if you're a writer, you should at least be able to send a letter.
If you like, you can write to me at local post office box 4152, Bexley North, New South Wales 2207. There will be a website up and running shortly that'll be loaded with stuff that you can download about it.
So put pen to paper, find out more about it, go along and become a better writer, or at least be exposed to people that want to talk about it.
Become a better person. Enlightenment through science fiction.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Well, it's still a hot afternoon here in Maynard, South Australia. Why the racing crew and I have been in South Australia for this event. We've been staying at a wonderful place called Lindock Hill in the Barossa Valley. Now, I don't run around normally on the Skeptic Zone promoting things and plugging things that aren't really to do with skepticism. Oh, sometimes. But I must say the people at Lindock Hill were wonderful hosts and looked after us very well indeed. Lindock Hill in the Barossa Valley, and it's my first visit to the Barossa Valley, a very famous wine centre, wine area in Australia. And it's just been a really wonderful experience to visit the area. Thank you, Lindock Hill, for looking after us. Coming up on next week's show, I have no idea. That's one of the joys about doing the Skeptic Zone, folks. Sometimes I have no idea. I think more Iran Sergeyev with a grain of salt. I think there are still a few more interviews to go from his visit to QED. And speaking of QED and people I meet in QED, of course, the wonderful news is Michael Marshall, who I met at QED, a good friend of mine, is coming over for the Australian Skeptics National Convention at the end of November. The lineup is looking so good. The tickets are selling very well indeed. www.skeptics.com.au for all your Australian Skeptics information and information about the upcoming convention. Looking forward to that. And just on a personal note, this is the last week that I am president of Australian Skeptics. I've decided to take a bit of a back seat for a little while. That's all right. That's fine. I'm looking forward to that. I'm still going to be very active, of course, but I just won't be the president. Oh, well, good luck to the next one. But for now, from beautiful Malala in South Australia, this is Richard Saunders, signing off.
You've been listening to The Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.